Since reading My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, I have somehow become obsessed with that world. If you don't know what the book series is about, it follows Elena and Lela, two best friends who are striving to finally leave their poverty-stricken neighborhoods and life in Naples, I think, not sure, Italy, and to finally become rich. As I started reading and now watching this series, I have become obsessed with Elena and Lela's relationship. Their friendship is weird and extremely unique because they obviously love each other, at least in my opinion, but they also have extremely competitive relationship as well. And sometimes it does get kind of toxic. While watching the show, I could not help but see that this competition is essentially what is helping them grow as people. And I think if it weren't for each other, especially Elena, she would have given in to the pressures of her family and stopped studying and eventually making it to university. It is that this competition that they have going on, for better or for worse, is what is essentially making them who they are as people. And for the first time ever, I started wondering, can competition between friends be a positive thing? So that is what we're going to explore today. I will be talking a little bit of spoilers. I will be saying a little bit of spoilers here and there, but it's not too big, I promise. But if you are interested in reading the books or watching the show, which by the way, you definitely should. It's so good. I would recommend you watch another video. But if you're crazy like me and you like spoilers because they act as motivation for you to actually start this series, then you should watch this video. Yes, today we're going to explore friendships, competition, by analyzing Elena and Lela's relationship and friendship. But first, welcome back to Lemoni. My whole life, I have seen competition as a bad thing. I have seen how competitiveness can drive people to do really crazy things. That is why I initially grew interested in the friendship between Elena and Lela, because they are extremely competitive to one another. I will not go into the hatred that people have towards Elena, which in my opinion is 100% uncalled for. I think that they both equally do very similar and very horrible things to one another sometimes, but because the story is from Elena's perspectives and we're hearing her thoughts more often than Lela, often people perceive her in a more negative manner. But I think that I don't agree with the Elena hatred. I will go down this hill. I do not agree with the Elena hatred. But anyway, this is a whole other topic and I really don't want to get into it. But generally speaking, we all kind of perceive competition as bad, right? I think me and you, right? This is just how culture is. We all perceive having rivalry between friends is not like a normal thing. In fact, a few weeks ago, I talked about a girl who went on TikTok to talk about how she felt like jealous of her friend and that life she had. And that was horribly received. So in the book early on, we can see how Elena's jealousy of Lela is what motivated her to do better at school. In fact, you can see early on that they were rivals before they became friends. But when Elena saw someone that was just like her, right, from the same place as her, but has exiled at things that she's wanted to do, that gave her sort of the push she needed to do better and to be better. And that caused her to study so much more so that she can keep up with Lela. And she succeeded. In fact, at the end of elementary school, she graduated with the highest grades. And of course, she was encouraged by her teachers to move on to middle school, which at that time was like not seen as something that perceived as important. It was perceived like you finish elementary school, you start working. And that's what basically caused Lela to not go to school, right? Because her parents wanted her to just start working already. They didn't want her to continue school. And despite the fact that Lela's teachers were really pushing that she would go because she's like this smart, brilliant kid, because of like, you know, the poverty that they've lived in, they refused to allow her kid to go to school and they wanted her to start working. And when that happens and Elena is the only person that moves on to middle school, she starts slacking off because she's not as motivated anymore. There isn't that thing that basically pushes her to want to be better and to do better. Elena only regains her motivation to study when she realizes that Lela has actually never stopped studying. She just like does it on her own now. In fact, the two started studying together, and Lela also helped her and tutored her in Latin, which basically what she was slacking off in and was not doing as great, and which actually helped her become even better at school and eventually graduate with all A's, right? But having that someone to compete with, where they have essentially the same dream and they're all working towards that dream together, allows you to stay on course. It allows you to not get distracted by the pressures of society and also the pressures of the parents who were like, yeah, why are you doing this school thing? Like, why are you doing this education thing? We need money. Like, go and get a job. And so that's what essentially stopped Elena from listening and falling into the pressures, is because she had that person and that path that she saw and she wanted to keep up with. And this was also seen in Lela, right? Though everyone tries to diminish it because they don't want to admit that Lela and Elena are essentially the same thing, but because they perceive Lela in a higher manner. But the only reason she started like working in her dad's workshop and designing shoes in secret was because she wanted to impress and keep up with Elena, and she literally said it herself. The reason why she continued studying on the side is because also she was upset that she couldn't go on into middle school, and she wanted to remain at the same level as Elena, so she kept studying on the side. Both of them are motivated by each other and the constant need to impress one another and to keep up with each other. And basically because of that, I started to change the way I viewed competition in friendships, because it started making me wonder, like, is it maybe positive? Of course, I started researching it a little bit more to see like what experts think and see if this is like an actual thing, because like I said, I've only seen this being perceived as bad in culture and not as good. According to a lot of things I've read, I was actually kind of shocked, not gonna lie, and that's why I actually decided to make this video. But a lot of things I've read said that rivalry is actually really, really good for us. Not only that, according to an article titled "The Science of Rivalry is actually human instinct." Over a century ago, psychologist Norman Triplett, I think, noticed that cyclists battled faster when riding against each other than when racing against the clock. He described this as dynamogenic effect, how the mere presence of a competitor could liberate latent energy not ordinarily available. In other words, rivalry taps into something innate. When we compete, the body and the mind awaken hidden reserves. Modern neuroscience supports this. Rivalry makes us try harder, and it also sharpens attention, enhances motivation. Anticipation of being compared to someone of equal standing fires up the brain reward circuitry, flooding us with dopamine that focuses efforts and sustains drive. First of all, I think it's really smart to use athletes, because I think when you think of rivalry, athletes always come to mind, at least for me. It also explains why we see Elena not doing well, not being motivated, but once she gets that push from Lela, she suddenly gets this insane focus and starts working hard. And despite falling apart, she would somehow get the highest grades at the end. And her need to compete with Lela unlocks something that pushes her to become better and better. Another article by the BBC actually further proves this. The author cited in that article cites one team of researchers who asked members of a running club to name particular rivals within the group. On average, the participants reported feeling greater motivation when a rival was present, and that tended to play out in their running times, producing 25 seconds advantage over a 5-kilometer race, compared to races in which the rival was not present. This shows that when we are actively competing with someone, we perform a lot better. So according back to the article I quoted earlier, they say that competition works best, not just like having any competitor. Having competitors is good, but having specifically your rival there is actually what generates the best results. Competition alone can elevate performance, but research by psychologist Gavin Kildoff shows that rivalry has an even greater effect. 3 ingredients drive it: similarity, frequent encounters, and evenly matched ability. So clearly we are motivated by competition, but can we be a rival with a friend? That is I think the question here. I think that's when it gets a little bit tricky. We can see it from My Brilliant Friend itself, the book series, and then I think they're called the Neptalian Quartet. Keeping competition positive can be a really hard task. Lila does try one time to sabotage Elena from going to middle school because she couldn't go to middle school, and she's like, I don't want Elena to go to middle school, so she does try to sabotage her. And Elena also does the same, though I don't think she does it nearly as much as Lila does. But Elena does sabotage Lila in a way where she constantly reminds her that she did not go to school, so she's not as smart as her, and she cannot understand the books that she understands, and she cannot speak with her in the way she speaks to her other friends who did go to school. But yeah, that also, these constant digs, especially when Elena feels like she's the inferior one in the competition towards Lila, is very, very interesting. So it gets a little bit hard to wonder if it's a good thing, right? And sometimes it gets to a point where you might wonder if your friend even likes you, if they're constantly trying to compete with you, right? Also, if we think about it, per the definition of Bell Hooks in her book All About Love, which is being dedicated to the spiritual growth of one another, Lena and Lela definitely do that. They definitely do love each other, and they definitely do actually contribute to each other's personal growth, though they sometimes slip and attack one another. Generally speaking, while they have made numerous, and I mean numerous, horrible things to each other, in the end of the day, they always help one another, and they always pull each other out of slumps and out of bad situations. Another thing to know, something we all know, which is that we are the average of the people around us. And if the people around you are these high achievers who constantly do things that you also want, you are more likely to work hard and keep up, because again, you are the average of the people around you. So having friends with the same ambitions as you can be exactly what you need to make it. It doesn't have to be a toxic environment. If you work with each other as a community where you push one another and work together to be better, then I truly believe it can be a great thing. Often, however, there is a pushback against that, mostly because I think it requires a level of emotional maturity that majority of us don't necessarily have. I also think it depends on the person, as mentioned in the BBC article. Yet another researcher failed to find consistent benefits of competitive interactions. In some situation, inducing a sense of rivalry with someone by highlighting a particular competitor and asking the participants to beat them, for instance, reduced performance. In those experiments, participants performed better without social comparison when they were simply told to try their best. So I also think, it depends on the person. And also maybe in this specific particular situation, because it was any competition and any competitor, and it's not someone that we chose to be rivals with, that kind of affects it. But to quote Christopher Toe, it's a question of whether competition psychs you up or it psychs you out. I think this may be something that will hinder some people's progress and could potentially make them quit. Other people, on the other hand, competition can be the guiding light they need in order to push each other to be better. And if you choose to take from the rivalry the good things, like the achievements you gain, rather than the failures and not being able to keep up with the other person, then you definitely can be friends with your rival. Again, it can be absolutely normal and completely okay and natural to feel jealous or resentment towards your friend/rival. But if you don't allow that to get between you and your friendship, then I think you are capable of being friends with your rival and having that be a positive thing. And also there is such thing as friendly rivalry, apparently. So what is that? Friendly rivalry is a form of competition where participants challenge each other in a supportive, respectful manner. Unlike hostile competitions, which often breeds negativity and animosity, friendly rivalry encourages growth through positive reinforcement and healthy challenges. It involves setting benchmarks based on each other's achievements, fostering a spirit of camaraderie rather than conflict. This kind of rivalry can take place in various contexts, from sports teams to workplaces, academic settings, and social circles. The key element is mutual understanding that both parties want to see each other other succeed while pushing one another to improve. So if the environment is mutually invested in each other's success, then it can exist between friendships. Think about it. It can be great. Someone that can understand what you're going through and can help give you tips that they may have picked up that you haven't yet. Like, for example, when Lela tutored Elena Latin because she found an easy way to translate them. It can be feedback. It can be encouragement. It can also mean really strong long-term friendships, right? Similar to Elena and Lela, who were friends until they grew older. So yeah, to sum it all up, I think that there might be benefits to competition and friendships if and only if the participants are capable of having emotional immaturity necessary to make sure that the growth here happens together rather than apart. Then yeah, I can definitely see competition existing within friendships and that being a very, very positive thing. And I think watching and reading My Brilliant Friend is so interesting because I feel like if it was set right now, then Elena and Lela's friendship would not have survived. There is a level of toxicity that in modern time I don't think we necessarily tolerate, especially with most of advice is saying, like, if someone hurts you, dump them, leave them, cut them off, which I don't necessarily fully agree with this. Entirely, it can be valid, but it's not entirely 100%. But you know, what I find so fascinating about this work, which I think why I grew very, very obsessed with it, is the author's ability to write something so deeply human. And I feel like it's almost based off of reality because of that. Like, the depths to which each character acts and how much they make mistakes and how even though they make mistakes constantly, you still cannot necessarily hate them. You still see them as humans that sometimes do bad things and sometimes do good things. And that I find so astonishing and so interesting to read. Anyway, what do you guys think? Do you guys think that competition can exist in friendships? Or do you think that it's not possible? I would love to hear your comments and your opinions below. And have you ever had like a competition going between you and your friend? I personally have never had that experience because if I ever feel like there's anything like this going on, I immediately like move away because I was super socialized to think that competition is bad. But I do think that it is very interesting. Like, have you ever had like a competitive friendship with a friend and have that be positive rather than negative? I think that's very interesting to think about and to see how that can be. Please comment below if you've ever experienced that. I would love to hear your opinion. I would also love it if you like and subscribe. I'm so sorry, but I know it's annoying, but it like kind of helps. But anyway, I will see you all next week. Have a good day. Bye bye.